The first question, Peter. When you started working with a knife, how old were you?
That's kind of hard. I think I was a teenager. My father taught me.
Why did you pick up a knife?
Because I wanted to learn how to throw a knife, and my father was an expert at knife throwing. So he would come in my room and see knife marks all over the door, and he would get upset because it was ruining the door, ruining the wall. So he set up a target in the basement and actually taught me how to throw a knife. He used to use the spin throw, where the knife rotates, handle over tip. And that was, I was a teenager, young at the time.
We know that you practice different systems of self-defense. Could you mind to share about this?
Sure. The first thing I learned was how to box. My father was a professional fighter, a professional boxer in the ring. Outside of the ring, he was a bare knuckle boxer, which was known as a fist fighter or bare knuckle boxing. So that was my very first time learning that. I learned how to box when I was around 6 or 7. And as I got older and I started getting into street fights, my father taught me bare knuckle boxing because it's very different from boxing. The footwork's the same, the bobbing and weaving's the same, but the footwork is very, very different. And then I had nephews that were doing karate at the time, and they taught me what they were learning in karate school. And I asked my father, I would like to try this. So we went around searching for schools, and I believe my first school was Goju-Ryu Karate with Ron Martin Sensei. And I did that for a little while, and then that's when I moved out of Boston to North Reading to live in the country with my brother. From there, I moved back to Boston, and then I got involved in Ketsugo Jujutsu, which Ketsugo is a Japanese word that means to combine, blend, mix, or put together. And there were, I believe, 5 systems involved. It was they called it ariwaza, but it was karate, judo, aikido, savate, French foot fighting, and a mixture of different types of jujitsu. And I did that for many years, and then years later I got involved in Taekwondo. I got involved in Fujiao Pai Kung Fu. I practiced a little bit of Xingyi, Bagua, Tai Chi Chuan, the fighting Tai Chi. I've done different types of Filipino martial arts, Arnis, Kylie, Screamer, and Dumag. I practiced very little Penjak Silat. I did some wrestling. I competed in judo, and there's some others I forgot, but it was a long time ago. I did a little bit of Wing Chun with friends who are Wing Chun teachers, and I'm trying to remember. Excuse me. It's been so many. I can't remember all of them. I hope that helps a little bit.
How long have you been teaching knife fighting?
How long have I been teaching knife fighting? Well, I started teaching knife fighting. I didn't. How do I explain that? Because I don't teach everybody knife fighting. I teach certain individuals knife fighting, and that was because I didn't want the wrong people to learn it and use it in the wrong ways. I started to learn knife fighting, I think, when I was 17 by different people. I was learning how to. I had a friend of the family who was a Vietnam veteran, and he used a knife in Vietnam. He used a knife in Korea, and he taught me not knife fighting, but how to kill with the knife. There's different types of knife fighting, different types of edge weapons use. There's fencing with a knife. There's grappling with a knife. There's controlling and different ways of using a knife. There's close quarters. There's mid-range, long distance. There's fighting from your knees, sitting down, lying on your back. There's all different ways. But my first teacher taught me how to kill with the knife. There was no fencing, no knife fighting. He was just basically, this is where it goes and this is what it does. This is the cause and the effect. So that was my first learning that. Then later on, I met people who taught me how to how do you say, fence with the knife, so how to knife fight, how to fence with a knife. And then there were other people that taught how to hold it and hide it on your body and how to get it out and draw it. So there's many facets, many levels of how to use a knife. It isn't just fighting with a knife. So the people I've taught, it depends on their needs. So if you're just an average citizen who needs it for self-defense, meaning you carry a folding knife that opens up, I would teach you differently. If you were a military person going into war, going into battle, then I would teach you a lot differently. The military person uses a knife maybe a little different because what changes is their objectives. Citizen is not allowed to kill anybody. You can't walk around killing people, but if you get attacked, the laws in this country, depending on the state, certain states, you're not allowed to defend yourself. So if I pull out a knife against the criminal who has a knife and I happen to kill him, I go to jail. Or if I use the criminal's knife against him and he happens to die, I go to jail in certain states. And then there are other states, if you kill the criminal, well, if you can prove you defended yourself, it's okay. So it depends on your objective. So that's why I'm picky who I teach. I don't teach everybody. I have business owners that learn knife fighting from me. And my whole, I don't want to take all the questions and answer them now because I figured you want to ask. But I teach people accordingly to what their needs are. I'll leave it at that because I know there's going to become more questions. I don't want to answer all the questions now. I like to have you ask them first.
Could you mind to share with us the main principles? How you start teaching knife fighting?
Sure, I'd be happy to. One of the main principles, or what we call concept ideas, is to always get out of the way and to teach every part of the body to defend itself. So that's the first concept. And from that concept comes many principles. There's many different ways. When I say principles, I mean the action of the idea in motion, either through a technique or through your body. So one of the principles we do is to have somebody come at you with a rubber training blade or a stick, and you just practice moving your body out of the way. And then once you learn how to move your body out of the way, then we show you as well how to use your footwork. Footwork is the most important thing. Then we have eyesight drills to train you how to see and read body language. So that even though you can't see the knife hand, you can read the body language and have a clue to where the knife is coming, from what angle, what height, what degree. We teach you how to see the distance, because distance is important. If somebody has a blade in their hand, you got a short amount of time, and the closer the distance, the less time you have to get out of the way. The next thing we do is we show you how to shut the body down. So if somebody attacks you, there's different ways of shutting down the body. One way is the brain. Another way is the heart. Another way is through the nervous system, through the armpit or the different parts of the human anatomy. Another way is to attack the bones in the bone system. You have joints, you have bones that you can attack and break. You break someone's ankle, they can't stand, you can run away. If you break someone's arm, they can't swing the knife at you. If you break their hand, they can't hold the knife. So that's another idea or concept that we use. And then we have, of course, how to use a knife, different ways of angles of attack in the air, and how these angles of attack fit in on the human anatomy. And this is a key point. Number one, get out of the way. Two, learn how to use your eyes, and we do that through teaching angles. Three, we have anatomy. Everybody learns anatomy. Four is distance. You have to know your distance. Five is timing. You must be able to time the distance with your footwork and your body evasion skills. And then there's more concepts and principles on counterattack. How do you counterattack somebody coming in at you? But the most important thing we teach is the brain. How do you use your mind? Your mind is more important than any weapon in your hand, because any weapon in your hand is an extension of your mind. So there are many concepts, there are many principles. There isn't just 5 or 3. I can write an encyclopedia on concepts and principles just on edge weapons, and that's not counting the stick fighting and the impact weapons we teach, or the flexible weapons, how to defend yourself against the knife with a flexible weapon, how to defend yourself with improvised weapons against the knife, how to fight multiple opponents with a knife, and how to fight multiple opponents when they have knives. So there's many, many levels to what we do. It isn't just one level, and each person learns at their own rate, at their own pace. You can't force anybody to learn fast. Anything good takes time. You must take your time, because once you learn the technique, then you need time to play it out. You need time to practice it. You need time to and that's because of my system is what we call a live art. It's constantly going under change because we're constantly learning to make it better. I'm still learning. I'm always learning. I don't stop learning. So anybody that gets to a certain level in martial art and then decides, well, I'm at this level, I don't need to learn anymore, be careful. Always be ready to learn more.
Can you tell us, do you have any certain tactics and strategy in your system?
Tactics and strategy is a major part of any system. I think all systems have tactic and strategy. The types of tactics and strategy depends on the type of war we go to. So if you're going to battle, meaning on the streets of Boston or the streets of wherever you are, or whatever country or whatever world you go to, maybe you're on the moon or in Mars, outer space, who knows? It depends on the situation. So strategy and tactics, I always teach my student, you have to be very knowledgeable and you have to be very tricky. You have to be able to trick and outwit your opponent. You have to be able to outthink them. And you have to know when to use your science, your martial science, when to use your systems of martial art. And that's all done through body language, learning to read facial expressions, learning to read how people move their body, what they do, how to read their behaviors. If somebody has a certain behavior and all of a sudden their mouth gets tight and their eyes crinkle up and they drop their chin and they start looking through the tops of their eyes, and maybe they kind of pick their shoulders up and they start talking faster, or they don't talk at all, and they start walking towards you, they're going to do some harm. So being able to read that is part of our strategy. Learning how to fight with a knife will teach you better how to defend with a knife. You can't defend against a knife unless you learn how it is used. If you can't understand the methods of edge weapons, how are you going to defend against it? So I think strategy it depends on the situation, and that's why each system, not just mine, but every system, they have prearranged techniques. And the prearranged techniques are first to teach you how to move your body and how to be coordinated, and then you let the two individuals, the students, play with the techniques, and the teacher, whoever's teaching, watches, and then from there they get ideas what the student needs. Okay, so each student has certain emotional feelings when they fight. So by watching each student, you have to change the tactics and strategy per student, because some students are afraid to fight. So you have to teach them how to fight while being afraid. Some students are very aggressive and ferocious, so you have to teach them how to fight with that. Some students are passive, and then they come at you, so you have to teach that way. So the tactics and strategy changes per student, and it changes per situation. If you got a guy with a gun, your tactics change. If you have a guy with a knife or a baseball bat, your tactics have to change again. So the strategy keeps changing. I don't know if that answers the question that you're looking for. I can try to explain it a different way.
Could you mind to share with us Does it important to have psychological preparation before starting working with a knife?
Yes, some people are afraid to work with a knife. They have a lot of fear. And this is what I was talking about, why your tactics and strategy depends on the individual and how some people are very brittle when they come into the classroom. I've worked with a lot of women who were abused. You know, they were either beat up or they were raped or things like that. And when I would go to show them things and I'd raise my hand to try to show them how to get away from a choke or escape from a wrist grab, or they back up and they put their hands up. So what I do is I take a step back and I lower my voice and I talk slower. And what that does is that calms them down. And then I do everything away from them until they get comfortable with me. And then over time, I help them overcome their fears. Now, I get men like that as well, not just women. I get men that were beat up and abused when they were younger and they're being bullied at work. You teach them a self-defense technique, they're going to be too scared to use it in the street because they have no confidence. So what you do is you have to teach them reflex drilling so that even though their emotions are afraid, if somebody attacks them, they reflex like a blink. If you have too much, if someone blows air into your eye, you automatically blink. You don't think about blinking, but you do. Your heart beats without you thinking about it. You don't tell your heart to beat. You don't tell your lungs to work. But what happens is it's on automatic response. So when we teach individuals who are brittle, meaning emotionally brittle or physically too scared to defend themselves, when we teach people like that, what we do is we have to teach them reflex drilling, where we use slow motion as a tool to teach. So I explain what I'm going to do, and then I do it very, very slowly. That way they know what's going to happen. And I step away from them, and I do it in the air in front of them a few times. And then I slowly take a step forward so they become calm, and then I do it a little closer. And then when I do it to them, I don't use any pressure or any pain until they overcome this fear. And then I can slowly, gradually increase the speed and increase the intensity as they grow in confidence. You can't teach someone that's afraid and expect them to defend themselves. You have to teach them to move without their thinking so their emotions don't get in the way. If you teach people to think through a self-defense technique, they get into a fight and all of a sudden they become afraid, they're going to freeze and they're not going to use the technique. They're going to be too scared.
We have a lot of situations today when one person practicing working with a knife in gym for 3-5 years, but when he faced real situation on the street, he doesn't know what to do and just run away. Why does it happen?
Why does it happen? Because the guy's smart. If he sees somebody with a knife and he runs away, he's a very smart person. I would run too. The thing is, the reason we teach people to stand and not to run is, what if you're with your family, or what if you're with your children and they can't run? And so you have to stay and fight. You have to protect yourself. I always teach my students, if someone pulls a knife, run away. If you can't run away, get an equalizer. Get something long to keep you from your distance from somebody that's trying to attack you. Now, someone who's trained for 10 years and then gets attacked and is too afraid to use what they've learned, that means they don't understand what they have. So once again, the guide or the teacher taught them the techniques but didn't get into their gateways of the brain that control the emotions of what they're feeling in their gut. Fighting is all gut feeling. It's not thought process. If you train to fight with your thoughts, you're going to freeze. If you train to fight with your emotions and what you're feeling, you'll always react. And that's why people, when they train for 5 years or 10 years and they get attacked in the street, they were training from the wrong place. They were training from their head and not from their heart. And that's the difference. So you have to learn to train with emotions, and when you have a certain emotion, how to deal with that emotion. And to be able to teach that, you have to find a special teacher, someone that understands psychology and someone that understands emotions and how it affects the physical anatomy. So you could train for 20 years and still freeze. It all depends on um, how you were training and how you were brought up in the martial art. And it can be fixed. And the way you fix it is through slow motion and drills and creativity. So if you learn to create on the spur of the moment, and we have certain drills that we do where we teach creativity, where the student doesn't think and you attack and they have to just do whatever happens, and then we stand right there by them while this is going on, and we are how do I say it? We're modifying what they're doing as they're doing it and making them aware of, look at what you have here, look at what you have there, like mistakes. When you were brought up, you made a mistake, maybe your parent slaps your hand, says, don't do that, it's a mistake. You're in school, you do something, you make a mistake, your teacher punishes you. So what that does to certain people is it makes them freeze. So you have to be able to read who these people are when you're teaching them. And you have to teach them that mistakes are okay. But in martial arts, mistakes are our gold nuggets, because when you make a mistake, we're going to teach you how to create through the mistake. So instead of stopping the individual and having them start the technique over, we don't do that. We're teaching them a technique, but they make a mistake. So what they're going to do is they're going to stay there, and we're going to show them multiple possibilities they can do through the mistake. After a few months of that, maybe 6-7 months or even a year doing that, when someone attacks you, you're going to be afraid, but you're going to react. That's the difference. There's two things you can do with fear. One is you can stand there and let whatever happen, or two, you can react. Most people who don't learn how to create through a mistake end up standing there because their fear overcomes them. People who learn how to create through a mistake and keep going are the ones that, when they become afraid, those are the ones that react and respond and survive.
How do you think, what pushed a person to start working with a knife?
It depends on the person. It depends on, if that's what they want. See, different martial arts teach, after you get to a high level, you work with the knife. And then there's certain martial arts that teach knife very first day. Like we teach knife very first day. We teach stick. We teach flexible weapons very first day, because it's an extension of the mind. It's not the weapon. It's the mind that's the weapon, not the weapon. It depends on, I don't want to say something and then hurt other people teaching martial arts, because everybody has their methods of teaching, and it's right. They're doing what they're supposed to do. So they know their students better. Me, I teach my students right away. As soon as they come in, they pick up a knife and we start working right away, first day. Sometimes we may use a hammer or a tomahawk, or we may use a machete or a stick. It depends on the individual. If they're scared to death of the knife, then they don't do the knife that day. We'll gradually work it in. It's like the firearms. You pull out a firearm to teach a firearm safety course, and some of the people in the room become very frightened. So then you realize, well, maybe we shouldn't have them in the room yet. You first teach them without the firearm, and you let them know what's going to happen. And then you bring something in, maybe like a training gun that's not real, and you let them hold it, get used to it, and work the actions. And then maybe you bring in an empty firearm over time. Some people are scared to death of the knife because they may have cut themselves before making a sandwich or got a paper cut, and everybody knows what that feels like. That's why more people are afraid of a knife than they are of a gun. Because how many times have you been shot? Most people haven't, but most people have been cut before. So it depends on the person, but in our school, we start right away with the knife. We use a rubber knife to train with, and as you get better, it switches out. We can go with a padded knife if we're sparring. We can go with a live blade if we're actually cutting targets, but that's after you coordinate it, because if you use a live blade too soon, you're going to cut yourself. So it depends on the person. It depends on the teacher, and every teacher knows what their student needs, what their needs are. So we teach right away. We don't, because if you're walking down the street, someone could pull a knife on you today. So why not learn how to use it today? So that way you can start learning how to defend against it today.
How do you think why there are so many people that really want to teach knife fighting?
Well, there was a lot of teachers before. It's just nobody taught above ground. So today, um, more and more teachers are coming out of the woodwork. There were always knife fighting teachers. They just didn't teach it openly. My teacher would never teach knife fighting. The teacher that taught me Filipino martial arts, who passed on his system to me before he passed away, Guru Judge Brewster, he was a World War II vet. He used his knife during the war. And when he came back and he taught me his system, we never ever did knife fighting outside. We would do stick fighting outside. We do empty hand, but knife fighting was always taught in a basement or in a living room or in an area where nobody could see, and that was always kept secret. And today, because of the movies, everybody wants to learn knife fighting. So I think a lot of people see that there's money involved. So if they teach it openly, they can make a lot of money. The problem is when that happens, it gets watered down, and the quality isn't as good as it used to be. That doesn't mean that there's not a lot of good knife fighting teachers out there teaching quality stuff. It just means that you got to be careful who you learn from nowadays. Just do your research. But there were always a lot of people teaching knife fighting, but it was always taught in private and in secret, and it was not allowed to be taught to the public. My teacher wouldn't allow me to teach knife fighting. We had to reserve that behind closed doors. And that was because he didn't want bad people learning it. Now today everybody's teaching it on YouTube, so bad people know it too. And that's why it's even more important for the good people to learn it, because in order to defend against the knife, you must know how the knife operates, how it works, and how to defend against it. It makes better sense defending against it when you know how to fight with one. Even if you don't have a knife, if you know how to fight with a knife, you can do a better job defending yourself against a blade or an edge weapon or a machete, because you know the angles of attack, you know the distance, you know what's going to happen, so you can be better prepared.
Do you have some certain criteria according to which you can understand if one person is a real master or not?
If you walk into a place and they're very humble and very kind and they shake your hand and they don't crush your hand, well, that can't always work. You have to know how to read the handshake. But one thing is you go in and you watch and see how they move. Then you watch and see how their students move, providing, they have students. Some people don't. They just teach one-on-one. But you want to see how they address certain answers and certain questions that are asked. You want to see how they move their body, how they move the knife, if they're teaching anatomy. Anatomy is very, very important. If you're doing edge weapons, you need to learn anatomy. Does your teacher teach anatomy? Does he teach the heart? Does he teach where the veins and the arteries go? Does he show how to protect these parts of the body, where the organs are, your lungs, your liver, your spleen, your kidneys? This is all very, very important in edge weapons. If you're not learning anatomy, you're not learning real edge weapons. Do they actually teach you how to cut through different things, maybe starting with paper, moving up to cardboard, practicing on rubber tires, and then eventually cutting into meat. This is just one aspect of it. Not everybody does that, but that doesn't make the person a bad teacher if he doesn't teach that. But it depends on, how do I answer this, where it's hard because it depends on what the student is looking for and what the teacher is looking for. So it depends on the individual who's looking for the edge weapons class. I mean, you could get a really good quality teacher, but the student and the teacher are not a good fit. So you got to keep researching someone that's good for you. There's a lot of people that learn knife fighting from YouTube and read books, and they practice on their own, and they're pretty good, but they may have never been in a knife fight before. And they've never really had to use a knife. And then you got people that have used knives, but they really know how to do it, but they're lousy teachers, and they end up hurting their students. So that's not good either. When you go into a school, you first have a meeting with the instructor. I'll give you an example. If somebody wants to learn from me, they call me up. I interview them over the phone. Then I meet them face to face. I sit down, I have tea with them or coffee, and I watch what they do with their teacup or their coffee cup. I watch how nervous they are. I watch how relaxed they are. I watch their facial expressions. I get an idea of what I want in a student. I want someone that doesn't want to use it to fight all the time and to just use it, go out and test it on people. I'm looking for someone that just wants to learn the art, maybe hopefully one day teach the art. So when you go into a place, you look for that. You look for a teacher that's looking for a student that's looking to teach the art, keep the art growing, keep it alive, and to protect themselves. And you don't want to go into a school where the guy, that's all he talks about is killing, killing, killing. Or, is like a real tough guy and he just wants to beat you up to show you how tough his system is. You don't want to go into a place where you're going to get injured. You want to go into a place where you're going to gain knowledge. It's a school of thought, a school of thinking. You want to find a teacher that's going to teach you how to think, not just how to fight, but how to think and use your brain. That's what you're looking for. And if the guy doesn't come across that way, I wouldn't train with him.
What kind of advantages your system has?
That's kind of hard to answer. That's like a loaded question. Because what you're asking me is what I do better than other people. It's not better, it's probably equal. That's the way I can answer that. We teach survival and thinking. I think all systems teach that, and it's just that we do it a little different. I happen to be able to read people, so I can teach them a little better because I can almost like see their thoughts, like in a little bubble coming out of their head by their facial expressions and what they do with their body language. And so that helps me to teach my students more effectively. So I don't think we're better than anybody. I think we're equal to other people, other systems. It depends on the teacher and the student. I mean, there's people out there better than me, much better than me. There's people out there I may be a little better than. When I say better, I mean able to teach, able to share the knowledge. That's what's important. It's not the system. It's either the teacher or the student that stinks. It's not the system. You can't blame a system if it doesn't work. It means somebody failed in either receiving the knowledge or somebody failed in giving the knowledge, transferring the knowledge. So we're not better or worse. We just have an effective means of sharing what we have with people. I hope that helps.
How do you think, does a knife have some future in 21st century?
Why not? I mean, everybody got to make a sandwich. Yes, I think it does. I think it does have a part in the future because movies are going to make that doorway. Movies are going to open the door. Already has opened the door for edge weapons because they make the knife look romantic. They make it look sexy. They make it look, like cool to be able to use a knife. So somebody watching a movie may say, well, I'd like to learn that. That looks pretty cool. But for self-protection, it is one of the easiest forms of weapons to get. You can actually make knives out of anything. In prison, they call them shanks. I used to train a lot of prison guards, and they would bring shanks to the dojo to show me what they've taken from prisoners, and they were pretty effective weapons. So I think you're always going to see knives. I mean, the cavemen used knives. They used a form of stone knives that they chipped away and made knives and tomahawks and axes with. Knives are used in every society. Everybody uses knives, and I think it's always been here. It's always going to stay here until they come up with the laser knife like they have on Star Wars. But then you may burn a hole through your pocket. I don't know if I'd want to carry one of those. But yeah, so that's my answer. Yeah, we're definitely going to need the knives. You'll see them around always because we got to make a sandwich, yes.
What could you recommend to people that want to start working with a knife?
Make sure you don't start with sharp knives because I was taught by my teacher, who was the Grand Master of the Filipino martial art method I learned, to always train with training weapons, never to start with something sharp because you can hurt yourself, and to go slow. Always go slow, and to learn as much about anatomy as you can. The more you know about anatomy, the more effective knife fighter you're going to be. What I teach my students is the stick teaches power, the sword teaches flow, and the knife teaches speed. And flexible weapons teach creativity. And once you have all that, then empty hand is easy. So a knife is just only a part of what we do. The stick is another part, the sword is another part, and flexible weapons is another part. So you don't want to just learn the knife. If you want to be a good knife fighter, you have to know how a stick works, because if someone has a bat or a stick or a crowbar or a pipe and you have your knife, how are you going to fight against them if you never learned how to use those weapons? If you have a knife and someone pulls off their belt or has a chain or some other kind of flexible weapon, how are you going to use your knife against the flexible weapon? So you have to learn flexible weapons to be a better knife fighter. You have to learn how to use a sword as well as use a knife, because then how are you going to learn distance with your knife? You have to be able to get in and get out. So my advice for them is, don't just learn the knife, learn everything you possibly can and learn what's available. So if you don't have a knife fighting teacher around right now, learn something right now that you do have next to you that's convenient. And then as you progress and become more proficient, you may find something else you can add on and learn. And then eventually you'll get around to the knife fighting. Because it's really hard to find somebody who has both, who cares for the student, doesn't want to injure them, and is willing to teach their art, because knife fighting is very personal. It's like someone wearing underwear. They don't go around showing you their underwear. It's personal. You keep that private. That's something you don't want people to know you have there. So knife fighting is like that. It's personal. So you have to be careful who you learn from, and you have to find a quality teacher. If you talk to somebody, you'll get a feel for them. If they feel good, then they're the right fit. If they don't feel good, you have a little strange feeling, don't train with them. So that's my advice to learning edge weapons. I hope that helped.
Peter, can you tell us, what is the knife for you?
An extension of my mind. So I use a knife every day. I work in a supermarket and I have to open boxes, so I use a knife every day to open boxes. Then I come home and I make food and I have to cut my food, so I use a knife then. So to me, a knife is just a tool, and a tool is an extension of my mind. And each tool is used on different jobs, depending on the job. So if I am being attacked, then the knife is a self-defense tool. If I'm eating, the knife is an eating tool. If I'm working, the knife is a working tool. So it depends on the situation. Everything depends. There isn't any one answer with me, because when you ask me a question, I'm thinking which situation. So everything is situational for me. I don't know if that helps or not, but that's why I say the knife is an extension of my mind, because it depends on what realm we're in when I'm using the knife.